Hi, my name is Jerry, I'm a fantasy author, and this video is gonna be a little different. Week after week, I sit down in this chair and speak about a topic of my choosing for however long I feel like, and every so often I do stop to wonder, is this actually interesting to people, or am I just answering questions nobody asked? Well, today I'll be answering questions that people definitely did ask, namely on Reddit. I'm going to pull up the subreddit r/writing, sort the topics by newest first, and then just start scrolling and answer whichever questions I think are interesting. The answers I'll be giving here are completely off the cuff, but I will transcribe them into proper posts later and then link them in the pinned comments so you can see for yourself how I get torn to shreds in the replies, if people even care to do that. So with that in mind, let's get into it. So, one user asks, self-contained chapters versus cliffhanger chapters. I believe many of us have come across advice in the past that suggests we finish every chapter in some sort of cliffhanger or another as to entice the reader into keeping those pages turning. I myself have definitely experienced books where I couldn't find a good point to put the book down because there didn't seem to be a clear resolution at the end of a chapter, and my brain felt compelled to keep reading to find the resolution to end the reading session for the day. However, in my own writing, and perhaps because of the kind of narrative and time jumps of weeks that occur between chapters sometimes, I find myself writing chapters that have a beginning, middle, and end with their own resolution to the scene with no major cliffhangers. My question thus becomes, am I really doing myself a disservice by not forcing every chapter to end in some cliffhanger, big or small? How do you feel about chapters that are self-contained? Have you read any books that do this very well? If so, what was the main driving force behind your continued reading? What are cases in your own writing where you've encountered similar situations, and what adjustments have you made, if any? Okay, let me start with a broader topic. If anyone ever tells you categorically to always do X, never do Y, that person is not your friend. That person is not trying to help you. That person is trying to feel smart. If you ask me, there is one and precisely one absolute in writing, which is that there are no silver bullets. And this absolutely falls into that category. Like every other literary and rhetorical device, cliffhangers should be there for a reason. And yes, it sounds like the obvious reason here is that you're meant to keep your reader turning the pages, but, well, your story should be doing that anyway. I mean, if cliffhangers are the only reason why readers keep reading your book, that to me just sounds like the rest of the plot is not terribly engaging. I mean, this just reminds me of the story of Shahrazad from 1001 Arabian Nights, who famously ended every single one of her tales with a cliffhanger because that was the only way she could prevent the Sultan from beheading her. You, as a modern-day author, are under no such pressure, so yeah, by all means, finish your chapters however they feel natural to you. Which is honestly like one of my other overall pieces of advice. Your writing should feel natural to you. If it doesn't feel natural to you, it's not gonna feel natural to the reader, and if you feel like you have to force a cliffhanger onto every chapter, then yeah, the reader will probably feel it's forced too, and it will just end up being like the literary version of clickbait. Next question. In your opinion, what counts for a self-contained book? Typically, publishers want self-contained stories with the potential for a series allowed from first-time authors. I define self-contained book as the following. Story with a clear beginning, middle, and end, which doesn't leave loose threads. Characters' arcs are at the very least feel complete, even if there's potential for a further arc in sequels. Depending on the genre, world building exists at least enough to explain on a bare minimum level how the story's world functions. What does bug me, however, is the first item, because I'm not sure if the publishers would want every single goddamn plot/arc strand finished by the book's end. Especially for a story with multiple POVs and quite some length, this may be a bit difficult to pull off if some of those less explored elements and arcs have very obvious sequel potential to an extent that you sort of crave to know more about them, even though they are self-contained already in the story, but also can't really further focus on them in the current story because that would bloat it and take away spotlight from the more important aspects. That was a single sentence. So yeah, I'm writing my first book, which is meant to be part of a trilogy, and I'm trying to figure out how to make it self-contained, but with the potential for a sequel, which really sucks because I can't cram the trilogy into one book, nor spread it into two, nor can I cut off certain elements which are at the core of the trilogy's identity, and therefore promise a sequel at the end of the first one. And I'd rather not start working on a standalone book either when the whole thing's meant to be part of a longer saga and I've been planning this one for a year already and its themes and characters keep me engaged in the process. I mean, for starters, I would say I definitely agree with the definition of the self-contained book as listed here. Story with clear beginning, middle, and end. Character arcs feel complete. World building explains on a bare minimum level how the story's world functions. Honestly, that is the entry-level requirement for world building in general. See my video on the subject. So I guess I do have personal experience on this matter because my books are also in a series, but whenever I'm giving people my elevator pitch, I do say that the stories themselves are self-contained. At least in the sense that none of the stories are a direct continuation of the one or the ones before it. This, mind you, is a natural consequence of the genre that I'm writing in because I write fantasy murder mysteries, so each book is its own self-contained mystery which is presented, explored, investigated, and then solved by the end. But also, when I was writing my first book, I kind of had the plan for a series, but I wasn't sure if I would actually be able to get it off the ground. So because of that, I also made sure that the first book could just be enjoyed on its own if it didn't get anywhere. Sequel potential doesn't make the story not self-contained. Self-contained just means, to me, that the story is not incomplete. Another comparison I can make would be the Discworld series by Terry Pratchett, which are also books that you can just pick up in any particular order. And there are references to past events, but they're not like required reading. Or I could even say Star Wars: A New Hope. It's a complete story, it has a happy ending, but it also has tons of sequel potential, which by goodness, they definitely exploited. The paragraph at the end, I mean, it honestly feels more like venting than an actual question because, well, the question asker is saying that their story is definitely a trilogy and they do not want to cut it down. They do not want to start working on a standalone book. So there's not much I can offer besides my condolences and maybe the advice that, listen, if you don't think publishers will be interested, you can always self-publish. And if you don't want to put in the work to self-publish, then you'll just have to face the fact that publishers will either need your book to be really, really, really good to buy the entire trilogy, or you'll have to put in some legwork and, you know, get a standalone book published so that you can build up some trust with a publisher. It really just comes down to that. Ooh, difficulty describing a character's interiority. This sounds relevant. Hey everyone, I wanted to ask for advice on a consistent problem I have, which is difficulty describing a character's inner feelings, thoughts, and their interiority in general. This is the key critique I get while all other aspects of my work seem great, like dialogue, setting, etc. The reason I can't seem to find an easy fix is because the main solution to this problem, reading more and studying the writing, is something I already do. That's not the easy solution. The puzzling part of this is that due to reading more books and studying them in my head, every other aspect of my writing seems to improve. Setting, vocabulary, plot, editing skill, and more. But for some reason, I can't seem to absorb how a character's interior world is portrayed, so it stays missing in my writing and I can't put my finger on why. I notice I don't particularly like when characters I read about go on a tangent about their emotions inwardly, and prefer when they show them through their actions. It might be a contributing factor. Does anyone have a similar experience? I would really appreciate advice. It feels like my writing, even though it looks good at first glance, has a noticeable hole or missing puzzle piece I don't know how to fill. It is taking every ounce of restraint from me not to link my How to Write Better Descriptions playlist in this thread, which I might cave in and do in the end. So yeah, if you've seen the videos, then you know what I'm about to say. Interiority is all about letting your reader's mind merge with that of your character to sense what they sense, think what they think, and feel what they feel. The core pieces of advice I can give about this are avoiding filtering, writing with empathy, and writing with conviction. It's about understanding your character, it's about empathizing with them, and it's about committing to their feelings, identifying with their feelings, and really putting yourself in their shoes. Interiority is not about describing what the character feels, it's about describing the world as the character perceives it in that moment when they're feeling something. Rant, I really dislike it when writing advice uses Star Wars as the go-to example. Can a story still be thought-provoking even if it doesn't specifically focus on a big societal or political theme? I had this idea for a story. I'm not sure what form of media I want it to be yet, but it's much more focused on individual characters than like a deconstruction of some big issue within society, and it doesn't really have an obvious moral. But I don't want to be writing some Sunday read that doesn't matter. I hate the thought of writing something that people will just enjoy and forget about. I want to make something that people will really love, even if it's just one or two people. For this particular story, I'm not just really interested in changing anything. I really just want to focus on characters. Can it still matter to people? Okay. Here's your problem. You're writing for other people and not yourself. Again, let me tell you a little bit of my personal experience. Before I published A Bad Place to Be a Hero, I spent well over a decade trying to finish a book. And much like you, I wanted to write something groundbreaking, something that people have never read before, and something that would redefine, at the very least, the genre that it was published in. I never finished a single one of those projects because in the end, my heart just wasn't in them. It was my ego writing, not me. One of the main reasons that I was able to bring myself to finish my first book is because that was the project where I sat down and I said, I'm going to write a story that I would enjoy reading. After publishing, I eventually started going to conventions to sell my books directly to people, and as I started attending the same convention multiple years in a row, I have had returning readers. At one convention last October, I had one person come up to my table saying that she read my first book, and she summed up her opinion saying, "I didn't always agree with the character's choices, but it made me feel things, and that's what matters." The bottom line is that as long as you finish your book, it will find its audience and it will mean something to someone. The only question is, how many people will it mean something to? Wanting to write a book because you want to become the next big name in literature is, in my opinion, a skewed priority. Okay, next one. Equal weight to scenes or variety. For the sake of the post, I'm using a made-up example to illustrate. Let's say the main character is going through the stages of grief: shock, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance with hope, and processing. Novel is broken up into 7 parts to show the character going through the stage and how they got through it. Do you think each stage should have equal weight regarding length, or do you think it would be better if some stages the character took a long time in and others they got through very quickly, i.e. they spent a long time, 5 chapters, in the denial stage, but were able to process their anger quickly and it only accounts for 1 or 2 chapters? Out of sheer coincidence, my books also happen to be divided into 7 parts each, though not for grief-related reasons. And no, those parts aren't all the exact same length because they don't need to be. It's the same reason why, you have your traditional 3-act structure in a story, and those 3 acts aren't all the same length. If you force all your parts to be the same length, then you will just end up with some of them being bloated and others feeling cut down. I can only repeat what I said in one of the earlier questions. It all comes down to how it feels natural to you. Next one. My goal is 5,000 words a week. I'm failing. I started my first book last May, and in 7 months I wrote 220,000 words and wrote the end on December 31st. I neglected a lot to get that done. 6 months later, I'm still not done editing and have started on the sequel. I spent a few months outlining the book and wrote a 30K outline chapter by chapter. This sequel is going to be easy, I thought. Week 1, 2 chapters, 5,000 words. Week 2, rewrote the beginning of chapter 3 5 times. Week 3, hoping I can finish chapter 3. At this rate, it will take 2 years to finish this book. I'm super busy and have a 2-hour window from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. to write. Sometimes I get too exhausted to think. Some of my favorite authors put out 2 or 3 books a year. I guess they must be full-time authors. Must be nice. Okay, first of all, do not compare yourself to other authors, especially full-time ones, as you said. But even with that, okay, your favorite author puts out 2 or 3 books a year because they do it full-time. There are also full-time authors who take more than 10 years to release a book. Also, 2 years to write a 200K plus word book, that is not a long time at all. Personally, I also have a full-time job and I write in my free time, and I only have a couple of hours to work on it every day as well. And recently, after publishing my 4th book, I made the decision that I will no longer try to release 1 book a year because it is simply not feasible, and my books are all 85,000 words long. You absolutely do not need to put this kind of pressure on yourself. It's a marathon, not a race. Next question. Do you prefer chapter titles or not? Do you have a reason? Do you feel like they give spoilers? Is it just personal preference? Do you like a glimpse of what you're getting, like a teaser? Does it make you want to keep reading instead of putting the book down like planned? I mean, for starters, as far as I know, chapter titles are not really a thing in adult grade fiction, and I've even heard people say that you shouldn't use them because it makes your book look childish. I don't know how much truth there is to it. Personally, I'm pretty sure you can guess my stance on it. If you want to do it, sure. Personally, it never occurred to me to use chapter titles in my books, and I just don't think I could be bothered to come up with them. And I don't see what they would add, to be completely honest. Although I will say one practical use that chapter titles have is that if you want to like reread a certain part of a book, then it makes it much easier to find because you can, look for the chapter it was in. So my vote is, yeah. What qualities make dialogue in a novel so effective at conveying emotion? Are there any rules or tips I can follow to make my dialogues more impactful? Striving to make the conversation emotionally engaging, overcoming the coldness of the text, and aligning the reader's ability to interact with the means of expression is something I care deeply about. Any tips? One practical tip I can give is that for the conversations that have really important emotional beats, what I like to do is to take up my phone, put it on record, and just act out the scene, basically improvising the lines, just putting myself in the shoes of the characters, and yeah, just basically treating it as a little improv scene. And I will do as many takes as I need to because I will usually like get more and more into character and discover more about how they feel and what they think in that moment. If you find it difficult to hop back and forth between two characters in this roleplay, you can also just do one side at a time. Also, as with descriptions, two key points are empathy and conviction. So identify with your character's feelings and just fully commit to them. Because sometimes your characters will say things that you specifically as a person do not agree with, but that should not hold you back from writing them down, because as an author, you have to be able to write about people who are not like you. Thrillers with a sad ending. Hey all, to anyone out there who enjoys reading a thriller, I have a question for you. I have hunted all over the internet for this, but it seems to be so rare that it is hard to find any information on it, so I'm asking you directly. How do you feel about a book wherein you are reading a thriller and the book ends in tragedy? I'm not talking bait and switch, I mean a book that is thriller all the way, but the protagonist makes the wrong choice and ends up losing everything at the end despite achieving what he thought he wanted. Would it make you rage? Would you feel cheated? Would you enjoy an ending like that? I would really love to know what you think, or if you have any good examples of books that does something like that. Honestly, if there's any genre where I don't go into a book expecting a happy ending, it's probably a thriller. For recommendations, I can point you to either the classic noir genre with works like Double Indemnity or The Postman Always Rings Twice, or in more modern literature, the neo-noir or noir revival genre with works like Blood on Snow by Hugh Nesbø or The Last Chapter by Edmund Power. Writing subtext. Does anyone else do this? When I want to write really good stuff, like important and emotional dialogue, I write two sets. I write the truth of what they want to say, then I write their emotions around that. Then I write another set in the table of what they actually say. Then I keep the emotion and behavior of the first and lines of the second and let the meaning kind of bleed through. It's one of my favorite ways to write dialogue depth. Anyone else do this or something similar? P.S. As someone mentioned below, it is also the technique explained in the Subtext writing craft book, The Emotional Craft of Fiction, How to Write a Story Beneath the Surface by Donald Moss. Yep, I knew I had read this technique somewhere. I actually think I read it in a book that was published earlier than this one, but this sounds right. Okay, so I don't think I do it this methodically, but I'm definitely not gonna yuck your yum. If this works for you, great. Writing is all about discovering your own process and whatever makes it feel natural to you. But I will say this is definitely not the only way to do it. I have written dialogues where I did kind of start by just writing down, okay, what is this character's perspective? What are their actual feelings? what is it that they want to say, and then kind of work around, okay, well then, how much of it are they actually saying, and what are they holding back and why? Also, in the case of my writing, there's an additional layer to it because, as I said, I write murder mysteries, so there will be a lot of times where characters will very deliberately hold back specific pieces of information, or not even that, it's not even that the characters themselves are deciding to hold back the information, it's that I, as the author, decide that this character should not mention this one specific thing just yet. So in my case, it's not so much about subtext, it's about carefully managing information. So yeah, in the end, I would definitely say that it doesn't hurt to put that kind of thought into your dialogue. Although one thing I would recommend is that when you are finished, just put it away for a little bit and then look at it again and give it a read through from beginning to end just to check, does this feel like an actual thing that people would say? So, was any of that useful? Was there something I missed? Was there something I should have talked more about? By all means, let me know in the comments below. This was actually really fun for me to do, so I would really hope to make this a recurring and possibly even regular feature, but we'll see how it all shakes out. So that's it for today, and until next time, stay tuned.